Boom! We are live, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to the Nolan Hawkeye Anthony YouTube channel. And I thank all of you for being here, wherever you may be. And of course, however you may be listening. We are back at it for another edition of a game preview. This week it is Iowa versus Wisconsin, fresh off of Iowa's 40-14 shellacking, largely in the second half, over the Northwestern Wildcats at home. As per usual, especially with bigger opponents, rivalry games, when I know that there will be the opposing team fans coming into this video, I give the disclaimer. Obviously, I am an Iowa Hawkeye fan, and I am giving my analysis largely from the perspective of being an Iowa Hawkeye fan. But of course, a majority of what we discuss are just going to be stats and non-biased information. And really, it's at the beginning and the end of the video that I give my personal take on the game and what I think is going to happen. Let's talk about the Iowa Hawkeyes and the biggest elephant in the room, which is the quarterback situation. Before we do that, I want to ask you guys to consider smashing that subscribe button, like, comment. You guys know the drill. We're getting very close to 2,000 subscribers. I want to thank each and every one of you guys for being a part of this journey and checking out this content. A lot of you guys are here every single video, and I really appreciate it. And without further ado, let's get into this. And again, comments, likes, any interaction in the video helps the video. So, have at it. The quarterback situation, as I said most of this in my post-game video for Iowa versus Northwestern, that I have been calling for this probably since the Northwestern game. And when it comes to Iowa football, because of how well they do in the other phases of the game, notwithstanding some of the lackluster performances from the defense, and this stat I'm going to show you guys at the end. It's a punt defense stat that shows the average yards gained on each punt. It will surprise you where Iowa is at. Iowa usually is solid, at the very least average at all of the exterior, non-offensive statistical categories. And when Iowa lost to Iowa State, I said that Iowa needed to go to Brennan Sullivan. But of course, Iowa's run game has done really, really well. Caleb Johnson, I think, is the best running back in the country this year. He's the second leading rusher in the entire country. And I actually saw an interesting stat that showed two other Heisman. I don't believe it was winners. It could have been. It was either winners or contenders that went to the Heisman ceremony. And their stats at this same point in the year. And Caleb Johnson is in front of both of them for yards and for touchdowns. And that just shows the type of season, the special type of season that he really has had. I'm going to see if I can find it actually, because it's a really good stat. So here it is. I found it. Caleb Johnson through 8 games versus the last 2 Heisman running backs. And again, I don't pay attention to the Heisman very much. I couldn't even tell you who's won the last 3. I mean, I know some of the guys that have been in contention, like Jaden Daniels, CJ Stroud, some of the big name quarterback guys. But I couldn't tell you who won. So I don't know for sure, but still, this stat, even if it's guys that were contenders rather than guys that won, it's still an impressive stat. I do actually think it is guys that won the Heisman, though, because it's Derrick Henry and Mark Ingram. Through 8 games, Caleb Johnson, 146 carries for 1,144 yards which is good for 7.8 yards per carry and 16 touchdowns. Derrick Henry in 2015, 180 carries for 1,000 yards, 44 yards, 5.8 yards per carry, and 14 tubs. Mark Ingram in 2009, 153 carries, 1,004 yards, 6.7 yards per carry, and 8 touchdowns. Now, of course, more goes into it than just your stats. Obviously, what do both those guys have in common? They played for Alabama. Alabama. That is, that's just the fact. Okay. This person said Ashton Genty is historic. He's putting up generational numbers, no doubt about it. Caleb Johnson is as well, though, and doing it without much help from any sort of passing game, which is very true. All in all, running backs are back, and this is a good place for football to be. So very, very true. But getting back to what I was saying about Cade McNamara in the Iowa quarterback situation, I have said, by the way, guys, follow me on Twitter at 247 Hawkeye. I have said that going back to Iowa State, that I wanted going back to even before the season started, I thought Brendan Sullivan should be the starter because I know, as a lifelong Iowa fan, with Kirk Ferentz being the only head coach that I have known, that Iowa needs a guy that can do stuff external the normal passing game, the normal scheme, passing scheme, or offensive scheme. They need a guy that can make things happen off script. And this is why Spencer Petras was not successful at Iowa. When you have a quarterback that is primarily a pocket passer, for him to be successful, and be what I would consider an above average quarterback in college football, he needs to be a really, really solid passer, especially if he does not have the ability to really run or escape the pocket. Case in point, Nate Stanley. Nate Stanley was an above average passer. Was he like an elite passer? I wouldn't say so, but he was an above average passer. And so even though he didn't have the added element of being able to run and scramble, he was a solid pocket passer. And you can look at that. It's reflected in his stats. I mean, the guy had 20 plus passing touchdowns each of his seasons at Iowa. He almost broke Chuck Long's total passing touchdown record. I mean, he is quietly one of the best statistical quarterbacks in Iowa history. But if you don't have that, then it becomes very difficult to be successful in Iowa's offense as a quarterback. Add to that, never mind the fact that I said this before the season started, okay? And I was even clamoring for Joey Labus way back when for Iowa to go with him because I know Iowa needs a guy with the added element of running. And even though Iowa has started to recruit more mobile quarterbacks, it is still so hard for them to go away from their traditional pocket passer, 6'4" to 6'6" type quarterback. Well, Cade McNamara notwithstanding. We know this. And even that withstanding, with Iowa having one of the best run games in the entire country with Caleb Johnson, who takes a ton of interest from opposing defenses and their game planning and in-game decision-making. They are focused on Caleb Johnson. They stack the box and make Iowa earn their run yards. Even with that being the case, Cade McNamara still has abysmal passing numbers. Still. And it's just not good enough. I want to show you guys, this is the play that everybody's talking about. Now, I like this play. I am not as uplifted by this as others, but I like it. I mean, I think that this says a lot about Brendan, but ultimately I also believe that he's going to need more than just this. I'm going to show you guys his downfield blocking. I can't play the sound or else I will get copyrighted. He does a bootleg shuffle pass and gets out 20 yards to block and nearly almost blocks his way to a touchdown. Nearly. Wow. Why does it keep doing the sound? There we go. Gets out, shuffle pass, blazes past the tight end. I mean, this kid can scoot. And then he gives a little bit of to the Northwestern defender. So, with all that said, suffice it to say, I believe that Brendan Sullivan needs to be the preeminent starter for Iowa for the rest of the season. And Iowa needs to give him at least a medium long leash to make at least a few mistakes so he is not fearful from day one of Cade McNamara getting that starting spot back. Because in the end, this season, I hate to say it, Iowa fans, but we're not going to, at this point, we're not going to be playing in a Big Ten championship game unless there's like mayhem that occurs. We're not going to be playing in the college football playoff. Even if mayhem occurs, we're not going to be doing that. Cade McNamara, regardless, will be gone after this year. It is time for Iowa to move on. I know in this day and age of name, image, and likeness, it is difficult for the Iowa coaching staff and the Swarm Collective to, how do I say this, move off of their investment, but they have to. And yes, the amount of money that they spent on getting Cade McNamara and the end result in his actual stats are not equal. And it's certainly not in Iowa's favor. I can tell you that. But it is what it is. That is the new modern era of college football. Iowa must go to Brendan Sullivan. The last point that I want to make about this quarterback situation is that for all you Iowa fans that are sympathetic to Cade McNamara, and I understand it, okay? I do. But for those of you guys who are sympathetic to Cade McNamara, let me ask you, and I made a Facebook post about this. Realistically, what more do you really believe Cade McNamara can do as a quarterback for Iowa? I mean, do you really believe that he's going to get that much better in the remaining games to basically have it proven that it's good to have him as quarterback? Of course not. He is not going to make big enough strides for us to go, oh, yeah, absolutely. It was worth it for Cade McNamara to be reinserted and reattain his starting lineup or starting position. He is who he is, guys. And honestly, while I understand why some Iowa fans might be sympathetic, as a former Division I water polo player myself, I know the nature of college sports and beyond. It's extremely competitive. And the fact is, Cade McNamara was given a long leash. He was given way more time than most programs would give their starting quarterback with similar stats, even slightly better stats than what Cade McNamara has had this season. I'm going to show you guys Cade McNamara's stats just so you guys can see once and for all. I've shown it to you guys a few times already. By the way, he is last in the Big Ten in QBR, just so you're aware. Okay, it's not a perfect stat, but it is a stat nonetheless. And he is last. Okay, Cade McNamara is who he is. All right. I am stunned that he has an average completion percentage above 60. I'm stunned. Most of this season, it has been below 60%. 8 games into the season, he only has 1,000 yards passing. He has less passing yards than Caleb Johnson has rush yards. Guys, that is not acceptable. That is not acceptable. Okay, Caleb Johnson has 1,100 yards rushing, and yes, he's having a historic year, but your running back should never have more yards than your quarterback in the modern era of football, unless you're running the gosh darn option, okay? He has 6 passing touchdowns and 5 INTs. Before the year started, I said that I would consider this a successful season if Cade McNamara had about 15 passing touchdowns and between 5 to 8 at the most interceptions, but more like 5 to 7. And again, that's nothing. Okay, 15 passing touchdowns to 7 INTs. That's nothing. And let's be honest, guys, he probably wouldn't even get to that. If he was on, if we were to project out his stats, he'd probably finish with only 10 passing touchdowns, and he'd probably end up with like 7 or 8 INTs. That is just not good enough. He has a rating of 115.8. Let me pull up the QBR rankings here. By the way, guys, have you ever like gone into your closet and or like a drawer and you're like, that's where that was, man, I like this. Why did I stop wearing it? And this hat is one of those hats. Like it's not the new era, but I do think that it is the one that Iowa baseball players do wear. It's the Nike one, and it fits great. It feels great. Now I did kind of mess it up on the brim. It's a little lopsided, but oh well, it is what it is. I got a little overzealous when I first got it. And I decided it's been a while since I've felt enough pride in Iowa football to wear a hat for these videos. I'm sure you guys have noticed that I really only wear the Iowa football hat when they win. Here are the QBR stats. Cade McNamara is second to last. He was at one time last, but after Jack Lausch, aka Jack Lausch, aka Jacques Louche, his performance against Iowa, he dropped to 34.6. Cade McNamara has a QBR of 37.1. And I believe what an average quarterback would be is 50. That is the stat that is around where you want to be, is at the 50 mark. Wisconsin, since this is Iowa versus Wisconsin preview, Braden Locke is at 14th. And Dylan Raiola is a true freshman, is already at 9th. Okay. This kid, as a true freshman, I mean, his stats aren't gaudy. He has 1,700 yards, 9 touchdowns, 7 INTs. I mean, it's nothing crazy, but still better than Cade McNamara. Okay. Ethan Kaliakmanis left Minnesota to Rutgers, and he's doing better. Okay. So that is that. Iowa needs to go to Brendan Sullivan, and I do believe that he will be the starter against Wisconsin for what it's worth. All right. Let's officially look at Iowa versus Wisconsin. I don't want this video to be too long here. Did I show who is first in QBR? Did I scroll it all the way up? First is Curtis Rourke, and Will Howard is second. Dylan Gabriel is third. Drew Aller fourth. All right. All right. Let's go back to the page. This game is a home game for Iowa. It's going to be played at 4:30 Pacific time on NBC, for those wondering. And ESPN Football Power Index gives Iowa a 58.5% chance of winning, meaning if these two teams were to play 10 times, based on the analytics, based on the fact that this game is at Iowa, Iowa would win 6 out of 10 times, almost. and they give Wisconsin a 41.5% chance of winning, and I could say vice versa for the out of 10. Statistical leaders. Braden Locke has 1,281 yards, 7 touchdowns, 6 INTs. Again, Cade McNamara, we went over his stats, but I don't think he's going to be the starter. I think it's going to be Brennan Sullivan, who had a decent game against Northwestern. Rushing leaders, T. Walker for Wisconsin has 624 yards on 126 carries and 10 touchdowns. Not bad. He's actually having, I mean, not as good of a season as Caleb Johnson, but it's still a solid year. I mean, he's approaching 1,000 yards. Caleb Johnson, 146 carries, 1,144 yards, and 16 touchdowns. Receiving yards, V. Anthony, 382 yards and 2 touchdowns. And of course, the new receiving leader since Jacob Gill has gone quiet for Iowa the last couple of games is now Luke Lachey with 209 yards. Here are the last 5 games for both teams. Wisconsin did just lose to Penn State 28-13 at home. They defeated Northwestern on the road 23-3. They defeated Rutgers on the road 42-7. They defeated Purdue at home 52-6, and they lost to USC on the road. So they, in their last 5, are 3-2, same as Iowa. But I would say Iowa's is a little bit more of a mixed bag. Northwestern, they defeated 40-14. Michigan State, 32-20. They lost at Michigan State. They shellacked Washington at home, 40-16. They got smoked by Ohio State on the road, 35-7, but it was close in the first half. And they defeated Minnesota on the road, 31-14. Let's see if there are any. Here is the spread for this game. Iowa comes into this 3.5-point favorites, which I'm a little surprised. I thought they'd be about 1 to 2 point favorites. The over and under is 42.5 points for this game. I just want to briefly show you guys, especially Wisconsin fans that check out this video, the stats for Brendan Sullivan, who largely played in the second half. He was 9 of 14 for 79 yards, 0 touchdowns, and 0 INTs. I'd be interested to see what his QBR was. He had a 68.1 QBR. No, that's for the season, actually. Let's see. His QBR versus Northwestern was 74.8, which is not bad at all. So man, if we could have that every day of the week, we'd be doing good. Especially, I mean, just above 50, we'd be doing a lot better than with Cade McNamara. All right, guys, we're going to go to the team stats here. Here's an interesting stat for you guys. This, like I told you guys, the punt return defense. Iowa, and I when I saw this, I was like, man, I wonder what Iowa's is this year, because they have had a few missed bad punt returns defensively, especially allowing a punt return touchdown. And perhaps this is an area Wisconsin can take advantage of. Iowa allowed a punt return late, touchdown late in the game against Northwestern. I think it was fourth quarter. Iowa is 131st. Allowing 21.71 yards per punt. I know LeVar Woods is not happy about that. Iowa usually is nails when it comes to special teams. Wisconsin, I think, is somewhere in the 50s, if I remember correctly for this stat. Yep, 51st. Next, let's go to and they are giving up only 5.91 yards per punt return. Total defense, Iowa checks in at 23rd, right behind Wisconsin at 22nd. Wisconsin's giving up 311.1 yards a game, Iowa 315.9. Next, let's take a look at total offense, see how that looks for both teams. If I had to guess, I'd say Wisconsin is going to be page So Wisconsin checks in, and this is very good for them. This is actually really good. I'd love for Iowa to be here. They check in at 69th, averaging 393 yards of total offense. Iowa is improved from last year, but again, the lack of a passing offense really has hurt their total offense stat. They are 102nd, averaging 347.9 yards a game. Next, let's go to scoring defense. Wisconsin is 24th, and again, Iowa right behind him at 25th. Wisconsin is giving up 18.88 points per game, and Iowa is giving up 19. Lastly, we'll go to scoring offense, and that will be the last team stat that we look at. I used to look at a lot more, but if you guys want to dive in deeper to the team stats, you're more than welcome to. I just don't want to make the video too long. So Iowa is 56th in scoring offense. They've done a good job of capitalizing regarding the opportunities that they have. Especially if you consider their total offensive number. And again, it makes sense if you consider Iowa's complementary football mindset that they try and instill, which means that they try and be smart and put themselves in positions to be successful, short yards situations for the offense to score, and things like that. Wisconsin is 77th. Isn't that interesting? How the two are literally flipped on between scoring offense and total offense. Wisconsin averages 27 points a game, and Iowa averages 29.4. All right, guys. My final analysis for this game, the opposing team's favorite part of the video. This is going to be a good game. I think these two teams, I do believe that Iowa is more talented on paper, but what they've actually been able to do with the talent that they have and what they are statistically this year is more akin to what Wisconsin is. And so they are relatively evenly matched teams. And by the way, Wisconsin has talent too. I don't want you guys to think that me saying that is saying that Wisconsin doesn't have talent. They do. They have talent up and down the roster. I just think Iowa is top to bottom a little bit more talented, especially at some key positions. The biggest question mark for this game, for Iowa at least, is going to be, number one, is their defense able to stack 2 games of a good defensive performance in a row? Iowa's defense has been good most of the season, but they have been shaky at times, much more so than was predicted, especially by me. Especially if you look at their performance against Michigan State. That's number one. Number two, and this is probably the most important, is going to be Brendan Sullivan. And of course, the punt game, Iowa needs to shore that up. But Brendan Sullivan, because now that Wisconsin has a week to likely prepare for Brendan Sullivan, it might make things a little bit different. It's a little bit, while it does present challenges, it also is in a lot of regards easier to come in off the bench when the defense and the coaching staff has not prepared for you at the quarterback position and your tendencies. Now, it is still hard mentally to come in and be ready to go mid-game, and Brendan Sullivan did a good job with that. But it'll be interesting to see how Brendan Sullivan is able to do now that a team is preparing for him for an entire week. And I'm sure there's plenty of tape out there on him as he was a quarterback for Northwestern last year. I do ultimately believe that Brendan Sullivan is exactly what Iowa needs at the quarterback position. And I do believe that he's going to open up more for Caleb Johnson, and we're going to see that in a full game of action. It's going to be hard for Wisconsin to stop Caleb Johnson if Brendan Sullivan and Tim Lester is able to keep them honest. Brendan Sullivan does not need to be one of the best Iowa passing quarterbacks ever. He just needs to be serviceable. Okay. He needs to make the throws that are there. I don't think that he's a bad passing quarterback per se, but again, he needs to make the throws that are there. And honestly, compared to Cade McNamara, I know Cade McNamara is supposed to be the better passing quarterback. I'm not so sure that that's true. And I do think his ability to run will open up more room for him to pass the football. But Tim Lester also does need to do a good job of finding easy pitch and catch throws for Brendan Sullivan to get his confidence up in a big game like this. This is going to be a great test for Brendan Sullivan to see where he's at mentally and see if he really is ready to take the reins for this Iowa football team. For Wisconsin, listen, guys, this is a game that can really be a stamp on their season and show to outsiders that Wisconsin is trending up and that they are moving towards being a top of the Big Ten rather than jockeying in the middle. In the Big Ten, there's tier 1, which is like 2 to 3 teams. There's tier 2, which is like 2 to 3 teams. And Iowa has largely been in that tier 2, approaching tier 1 at times. When last year, when I did my Big Ten whip around show, and I do want to find time for that moving forward, just so you guys know, it's just been hard this year with how busy I've been. I always did a tiered system because that is how I see it. I see the Big Ten in tiers. I don't like to do power rankings. I like to do it in tiers. Now, ultimately, you still, towards the end of the year, you could put this team in front of that team, even within tiers, but that's kind of how I see it. And Wisconsin, for most of the year last year, was in that tier 3 approaching tier 2 range. So if they are able to get this win, especially on the road, this will be a sign that Luke Fickell is taking this Wisconsin team in the right direction. If Wisconsin wants to win this game, they're going to have to stop Caleb Johnson, and which I'm sure they're more than capable of doing, as they have a solid defense and usually have a stout run defense. That is what they're going to have to do, and they're going to have to force Brendan Sullivan to make plays. Ultimately, my prediction for this game, I'm going to go Iowa 20. Actually, no, I'm going to take that back. I'm going to go Iowa 24. I'm going to give them a few more points because of Brendan Sullivan. Wisconsin 17, 24-17. I almost said 14, but I think Iowa wins this game by a touchdown. And Wisconsin finds a way to keep this game close. But I still wouldn't be surprised if Iowa is able to win in that 10-point range. But this is going to be a tough matchup, and this is really going to let us know really where this Iowa team stands. Are they towards the top of the Big Ten, like a lot of people thought, or and a dark horse, which obviously that's over now, but a dark horse contender? Are they going to be the team? I said this in the post-game video. Iowa, are they, by and large, the team that dismantled Minnesota in the second half, shellacked Washington, and shellacked Northwestern, and did well against Ohio State in the first half? Or are they Ohio State in the second half? Are they Iowa State in the second half? Are they the game against Michigan State? Which of those are they more akin? I think they're closer to the former rather than the latter. But this game will certainly let us know. All right, guys, thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to smash that subscribe button, like, comment. You guys know the drill. And last but not least, DBAP, don't be a pussy willow and facts or feelings, because your feelings just don't matter. I love you guys. See you guys next time. Go Hawks. See you guys next time. Bye-bye.